Okay, we're live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest. Her name is Becky Parker Geist. Her last name is spelled Geist, and she is the founder and CEO of a company that I haven't.
The audio just froze, so Okay, well, I'm not actually sure it's if I need to re-log in or what, but at the moment, it seems to be frozen on my side here. Oh dear. Okay. Right. I did not. Once the introduction started, then everything else froze up. So it looks like I'm still in the show, so I'm going to go ahead, um, and maybe I'll get some directions in the chat or something. Find out what that first question was. But so I am Becky Parker Geist. My company, Pro Audio Voices, is focused on audiobook production, marketing, distribution, and it's something that I actually got into the audiobook industry back in 1981 when we were on working with reel-to-reel tapes, the big canisters, and we send them off from Talking Books for the Blind to Library of Congress in Washington, and they would get shipped back and forth. And fascinating now to be at a point where it's all digital downloads.
That's the first time I've ever been kicked off of my own show. So sorry
Oh my
about that.
gosh.
At what point did I kick out?
I lost you while you were in the process of it seemed like you were just wrapping up the introduction. I didn't hear a first question. So.
Okay, well, I really apologize. So please continue. We got to the international, the audiobook production, marketing, complex, and unusual products, right? Projects.
Sorry, what was where I left off?
Oh, where I left off. Yeah. Anyways, I'm really sorry. Please continue. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, sure. So, yeah, when I got started back in '81, it was a whole different industry, and it's been fascinating to me to watch this development, over the last several decades, moving from, where I started in it to cassette tapes to, CDs, and now, it's all pretty much digital download for the most part. Um, and I came into it from the theater side of things. So I started as a narrator, and it was when I started doing Talking Books for the Blind that I just fell in love with that process. Uh, so it felt like the natural thing for me to bring all of that, my theater experience, my production experience, as I continued that over the decades to where I am now with, and starting Pro Audio Voices. One of the
No,
yeah.
please continue.
Yeah, one of the things that the kinds of projects that I especially love getting into are the really complicated ones, the full cast, music, sound effects, really crafting this immersive audio experience. We certainly do lots of single narrator and other kinds of multi-voiced as well, but that's kind of my.
Have you done any of those complex or unusual products for podcasts? Because I'm finding that that's the case now. Like mine is very underproduced, as you can see. So I apologize for that. But some are super well produced. They have music, voiceover, all kinds of theatrical type of elements.
Yeah, they are. Now we haven't done that with the podcasts that we've done so far. Are they haven't leaned into that. The hosts haven't wanted to go that direction. But because we have the experience in audiobooks, it's something we could just shift over, because it's just mostly a question of where are you going to post your audio. You know, there's a lot of potential crossover between audiobooks and podcasting.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. Just my feel from talking to lots of authors, their narrator is very important. My last
Yeah.
person that I had on, Dugard, who sold 20 million books, is able to really get good actors. He liked this guy from the UK who was on Harry Potter, but I'm finding more and more than the last two, since I've been doing this for 2 or 3 years, 4 years. Uh, that's an important component of the production of the book, is the audiobook.
Yeah. It's one of those things. I've talked with people, and even there are some other production companies that really push to have the author narrate their own work. And while I could say, well, sometimes yes, sometimes they've got those skills, but it's a whole different set of skills. And the assumption that the narrator, or that the author, is going to be the best narrator for the project, I think is a false one. It's on a case by case basis. It really should be taken a look at if the author is inclined in that direction. Because there's a lot of people who they're not that comfortable with it, but they feel like they're supposed to. And then
I've been finding that more and the bigger authors are getting professionals, not
yeah,
themselves.
yeah,
Smaller guys. But
yeah.
are you familiar with the stat that this is almost reaching parity, where the sale of the hardcover, paperback, and Kindle are the same as the audiobook?
I have not. I'm not familiar with that stat, but it doesn't surprise me, really. Yeah. What I would,
I-
and there's actually a thing about this that I'm really passionate about, and I just want to touch on, and that is what happens for the author in terms of those sales, because I feel like we've come to this place where, like, this has kind of been over my lifetime, where indie publishing has sort of had its start and its growth, and now uh, it it's a significant, indie publishing, may have even at this point surpassed where traditional publishing is, right? But the models and the platforms that we have are all based on sort of that traditional publishing model, where the publisher is handling, the editing and all the graphic design and all of that stuff that goes with it, and doing the marketing, right? They're putting out the expense, and so it makes sense for them to take a big cut, to recoup their costs and make their profit before royalties get passed on to an author. But that's not really what's happening in the indie publishing world, because in that version of things, it's the author who is putting all the time in, doing the marketing, paying for the editing and everything. And yet the platforms that we have available to us and the retailers, they still take the biggest piece, right? So it feels like we're in this especially challenging place right now. And it's something that at Pro Audio Voices we've been been wanting to provide a solution for, with, at least in the audiobook world. And we're just about to roll out Amplify, which is a program. It's a direct sales program that lets authors sell their book through that platform, earn really high royalties, the bulk of the royalties, and then and also have more control, which they don't have right now. Because if as an author, if your book sells on Amazon, they're not going to tell you who bought it and their email address, right? There's no way for you to contact them again. As we know, that's valuable information, which is why they keep it for themselves, you know. But
Right.
yeah, this is, but we're rolling this out so that we can, provide the kind of control, the kind of royalties that we feel like indie authors really deserve. So I'm really excited about that.
And yeah, that's great. Do you know what the payout is from Amazon for an audiobook to the author and to Amazon?
Yeah, yeah. So they claim that it's either 25 or 40%, uh, depending on whether you go exclusive or non-exclusive. They don't say of what. They don't say, so you make this assumption, and I think they count on everyone making an assumption that it's of the retail price, but it's really of whatever they sell it for, and it's actually 0 to 40%, because if they give it away as a teaser to become a subscriber, then you don't get anything for it, right? But they choose that. They get paid for the subscription, but they're not paying the authors for their books. So it's really hard, especially on Audible, to be able to get any kind of royalty return unless you're selling a really high volume of books.
Of audiobooks.
Yeah.
What do you think that is where you get that uh, prime level of return? How many books do you think you have to sell?
To sell on Audible, you
On
mean?
Audible, yeah.
Uh, at least 1,000, maybe, but it's going to depend. There are so many factors. They will vary. Like, they have a factor that includes how long your book is. And then they have many different ways of selling your audiobook. So depending on which category it falls into, how long your book is, they have quite a complicated formula. But what I have seen consistently is that when authors hear that they're going to get, let's say, 25%, because they want to go and distribute wide, which I recommend, they look at those reports and they say, well, wait a minute, I sold, 100 books, but it looks like I only got like 25 cents per book. And how does that work out? It's not, it's, I just really question what's going on there in terms of that formula, because I feel like there's such a lack of transparency about it, you know?
It's interesting. I
Yeah.
mean, especially with the amount of sales that are happening on these audiobooks. I think
Yeah.
that they're significant proportion,
Yeah.
especially if you're selling significant amount of, or you're a known author.
Right.
It's a huge component, and its
Absolutely.
variance. It's a very different from the Kindle. The Kindle's fairly flat. It does have variations in payouts based upon size, but
Mhm.
it's roughly 70-30.
Right.
And so with little variance, and the print is a little funnier too, which isn't the same as the Kindle. And then the audiobook, they have their own pricing structure,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
pretty curious.
You
Especially,
know
it's almost like you said, it's almost like an archaism because now data is so easily transferred
Yeah.
that they can't quite hit the Amazon or Audible cannot convincingly tell the author that should be a component of the sale of your audiobook is based upon data size, in my opinion.
Yeah. That's right. And then there are other models, and that like a couple, I think it was a couple years ago, may have been less. Time is tricky. Um that Findaway Voices came out with their authors direct program, and I thought, great, that's what we've been looking for. Somebody to step up and offer higher royalties, because the authors are the ones who are doing all the work. And I do think it's good, but it really bothers me when they claim, that they pay 70%, and then they just leave it at that. And I'm always telling authors, like, ask the question, 70% or whatever percent of what, right? Because if you read their FAQs, you find out, well, actually, it's 80% of 70% of
Right,
what it's
interesting.
sold for. That's not really the same thing. Um,
So how can you get the highest royalties? What's your advice? And then how can people maintain that control and not give it to a publisher or Audible
Right.
or some of these companies, Amazon?
Yeah. Well, there's only one way that I know of right now, and that's with the program that we are just rolling out. Again, it's called
Amplify.
Amplify. There's an app that's being developed specifically for it. We're so close to rolling it out. It's officially rolling out 1st of December. But that gives authors not only so you get 65% royalties of whatever the author chooses to sell it for. They can do promotional pricing, they can do coupons, they have direct access to their customer information. You know,
Interesting.
when you talk about we talk about book marketing, right? And probably most marketing, but I'm only familiar with book marketing. So, you know, we know that email marketing, being able to reach out to your customers again, is really important. And from my perspective, I feel like it's really, we're in this place of we talk about community and how important that is. And we want the connection. And more, there's also sort of goes along with this. There's this growing awareness on the part of consumers that it's really good to like buy local and buy direct. When you buy direct, your purchase is making a bigger difference than if you buy through some retail platform, right? So, like when I go to buy a book, I might find it on Amazon or any other platform, but then I'll go try to find the author's website and find out where they want me to buy it, you know? And there's this growing awareness about that. So this is also a part of what Amplify is trying to drive home in the messaging there is like buy direct from the authors because you're able to make a bigger difference.
Right. So the money flows through to the author. Amplify will be an Audible competitor,
Right.
but more closer to the ground. So it would be the
Right.
equivalent of buying from your local bookstore, your
Exactly.
local audiobook store. And then
Exactly. Yeah.
and so there's more connection. There's more, you get more something from that author. So the authors
Right.
are incentivized to go through you instead of Audible. They could
Right.
probably do both, but promote this Amplify on there.
Exactly. And I encourage that because, we don't wanna, like, not be where our audience is. I think it's important to be in a broad range of channels, Let's be on Barnes& and Noble and on Audible and iTunes and all those places, audiobooks.com. And you know that you're gonna be the one as an author, that you're gonna be the one that's driving the traffic to the places to buy. For the most part, right? It's either through your email marketing or it's through your, social media posts, whatever. You're gonna say, where it's available. So use that to then drive them to your own page, and then you're earning these much higher royalties. I feel like
Perfect sense.
we're trying to help make writing, being an author, like a sustainable occupation, you know?
Right, and often it isn't, unless you're one of these big ones. I'm not one of those. You usually are if you go with some of these old line, publishers, your take is it's scarily bad. Like, wow. Like,
Yeah,
I was incentivized to become a self-published back when it wasn't as cool as it is now,
yeah,
just because they offered me a terrible rate. It was like 10%
yeah,
net, not gross. So it was like after they
right,
wanted to take their costs, it was nothing. I was like, "Oh, no, this is terrible." And
right.
they gave me all the baloney. "You're a first-time author. We're an unknown person, therefore we can't pay you, blah, 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 blah."
Yeah,
So
yeah,
this
no,
is an opportunity. This Amplify sounds good,
that's right,
especially
yeah.
with the growth of it. I had a really wish I could remember his name, but he sold 11,000 Kindle and 11,000 audiobooks.
Wow.
That's why I have that number, that parity number. So he was selling a significant audiobook, but think about, and you probably know this, but the audience should listen. Think about the difference in getting paid. So he's getting maybe 70% of that 80% from Kindle, but on his audiobook, strangely, he only comes
He's
back home with
yeah,
35%,
yeah, he's not gonna get very
30%.
much. Yeah,
Yeah, it's great. It's
yeah,
it's another it's another trick where the guy at the top
yeah.
gets the lion's share. So
It is, and even just looking at, like, I've just recently been, really taking a look as I'm, sort of preparing webinars and stuff to explain what Amplify is and how it works, and looking at from a historical perspective, why we are where we are. But there's this complexity factor with audiobooks that the other formats don't have. So with a print book, you have an object, right? And with an ebook, you have a digital object, even easier, right? With an audiobook, it is a collection of objects. It is a collection of digital files. And, your cover image and your metadata is kind of all mixed in there. Um, but because of that, it makes the delivery of the product much more complex. So we can't just, like, sell it on our website easily as you might be able to, because almost everybody has some ebook reader at this point because they're so common. But there's there are a lot of complications, partly around DRM and trying to protect your book from being just given away to anybody, you know? Um,
Which has happened to me. It's a
yeah,
it's a terrible event. When you
yeah.
find your book on archive.org with 1,000
Ugh,
downloads, or library, which they just shut down,
oh, man.
it's a little disappointing. It's depressing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, it makes it, as we looked at, okay, well, yes, there's some other ways to sell it kind of directly, but they have either you have to pay a significant monthly subscription fee, or you have to pay, um, you have a clunky customer experience, and that's no good because they won't stay. They makes it too hard to listen to your audiobook if it doesn't bookmark where you left off, for example.
Right.
So we recognized, okay, that first of all, we need an app that's going to give a really good, smooth customer experience. And we need a platform where we can, we can give authors the control over their products. And so that's what we've been putting together. And it's coming together really beautifully. And I'm, like, so stoked.
Cool. I mean, that's great. It's a great idea. I'm glad that you're doing something like that. I've
Yeah.
seen
Yeah.
something similar to that not in an application, but websites like there's Gumroad where you can
Mm,
sell your product as an author. But this seems
mhm.
Amplify seems like the app for the audiobook to do that as well with much more control. These
Yeah.
big companies, man, they do the strangest things. I've had such an amazing uh, history with Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, I can tell you all kinds of
Yeah.
horror stories. I've been in the game for 12 years. But when you, uh, what are things that people should know? When you're an author doing an audiobook, what kind of advice do you have for somebody who wants to get an audiobook? Should they
Yeah.
talk to you? How do they find the correct narrator?
Yeah.
What's the
Well,
process?
I would
What's the-
yeah, well, and we are always loving to talk with new authors or authors who are interested in learning more about how they might get their book into audio, and we love helping those folks. So please visit proaudiovoices.com and set up a call with us. But here are some things that I think really are so important and are astoundingly so overlooked in our industry. And the first one of those is pre-production. So, my experience in talking with other authors who have also been produced and, had their books produced in other places, I what I see is that there is this kind of approach to an audiobook where it's like, okay, here's the manuscript, we'll get that read, boom, you're done. And our perspective is, let's take a look at your manuscript and see what opportunities there are to help make this something that will both be a really great listening experience and also help you leverage that audiobook asset as an author. So there's both sides of that. And that one of the easiest ways to talk about what kinds of things we look for is if we're talking about nonfiction, although there's lots of opportunities with fiction as well. But with a nonfiction book, you often have, let's say, some other uh, either services or products or something that you have available, right? That you'd like people to know about. So it would be great if they came to your website. So that's like a goal, right? Now, let's say you have a visual, some graph or something in your book. You could just omit it, and that's sort of a typical approach, or you could describe it. But from our perspective, well, why not describe it, make sure they're getting the content that they actually should be getting as a consumer of this book, but also invite them to your website so they can see it, right? Um, and then there are things, even simple things like making sure that you're about the author is included. I'm amazed at how many don't include that. As a listener, I love those about the authors. I also love bonus material. I like interviews, So we're looking at what are the ways that we can build this relationship, author to consumer, right, to listener. Yeah.
That makes sense. And you also, what kind of mistakes should you want to avoid to efficiently produce an audiobook? What would you recommend? What mistakes should people avoid?
Yeah. So, well, one is not overlooking that, but another is, making sure quality really matters in audiobooks. And in some ways, I would make an argument that it matters even more than it does in the other formats. And here's why. Because when most people are listening to an audiobook, they are listening with earbuds or headphones. You're like, it is such an intimate experience. You're that narrator is like in your head, you know? It's very intimate. And so making sure that your audiobook is really high quality really matters. Now, the industry has technical spec standards that are going to help with that in terms of the audio quality, but they're not going to help in terms of the narrative quality, right? And this is where, we were talking earlier about, well, should an author narrate or a professional narrator? This is why, in general, I lean towards professional narrators because, we've developed those skills. We know how to keep a consistent uh, quality. I mean, there's little things that authors may struggle with. Little things like when you're when you have your microphone, like keeping a consistent relationship with your microphone so that you're not moving all over the place or turning to the side. It's a little thing, but it makes a huge difference in your audio quality. And I've even been amazed at how, we do have authors who will narrate because that's important to them. Um, I've been amazed at times when I hear them read their own work and I go, oh, wait a minute, that sentence actually didn't make sense. You need to stress this word for it to make sense, you know? And at first, the first time, few times I worked with authors in this way, I thought, I don't get that. It's their material. Don't they know how to read their own material? But then I came to understand that it's all coming to life very vividly and clearly in their own heads. It's a skill to be able to express it, you know, um, orally. So,
Right.
yeah.
A lot of those authors do not. Are the reason they're authors is they don't have some of those theatrical elements to their
Yeah.
personal voice or personality
All right.
too, which not everybody
Absolutely.
has that. And it is a talent, it is a skill, and I've seen a lot of actors are in these audiobook narrators for that reason. They've
Yeah.
been taught to how to emphasize
Yeah.
sentences, things like that. That's why they work. That's why almost all of them are actors, actually. A lot
Yeah.
of the really
The
high end.
best ones typically are. And and there are some, great voiceover people who are great at commercial stuff and not good at audiobook narration because it's a long form and you have, it's requires different skills.
Yeah, it really
And there
does.
are there are authors who are like trainers and keynote speakers, and they're really good with a microphone in front of an audience. In a booth, it's a different thing. First of all, because you're you're speaking more like to one person not to a whole room of people. The one person currently is the microphone, right? When you're actually doing the recording. Um, but the intimate quality is different in terms of that tone than it is if you're front of a big room.
I agree. It's a really kind of a storytelling skill, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of hard words. Like I've done readovers and stuff. It's a lot. It's much harder than people would think. Like
Yeah.
I've done history books. You can see my own podcast on history books that I read, and it is a challenge.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, it is.
Um, what do you think? Like people should find you. I mean, I guess a lot of these guys are the higher end authors for sure, are finding skilled, trained, some Shakespearean actors. What do you think people who are authors who want an audiobook, and maybe this is a preceding question, is should everybody get an audiobook, and how would they get a narrator for that?
Yeah. So it's not necessarily appropriate for every book. Some of the ones that it makes less sense for are those that are really visual, and that's the main point, is that, like, coffee table books often land in this world, but even that excuse me one sec. Even
Okay.
that is, not always the case. I'm working with, some clients right now. They have this beautiful coffee table book, and there are also these short essays, and they're having the essays we're narrating those, but then also describing the images, which is really interesting. It's for the visually impaired. So
Mm.
it's not a blanket statement. But the other uh, the other genre that doesn't work so well as an audiobook is like a reference book, where you're not really reading the narrative. Like, would you read a dictionary? Nah, you wouldn't, right? So there are some exceptions, but um, other than that, if if you don't get an audiobook created, just know that you're gonna be missing a big chunk of your audience. 'Cause a lot of people, that's the only way they're consuming books right now, and they're listening to a lot of them. So many people I talk to, it's like, "Oh, yeah, I used to be able to read a few books a year, and now I'm like 20, 30." They just, like, burn through them because they're able to listen. Makes a huge difference.
I was just about to say everything you just said. Some
Yeah.
people, that's exclusively now. They're not reading books at all. And for them, they're either on a walk or in the car, or they're
Right,
very busy or on plane flights, and they're successful, talented people. This is their time
right.
to get away. And also the audiobooks of the pleasant narrator is part of the atmosphere, not just some
Absolutely.
droll guy rambling on like me, but actually a skilled voice narrators. If your
Yeah,
time
yeah.
is valuable, like some of these high powered people, it's important.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And in terms of, like, getting your question about about y how do you get started with with doing an audiobook? How do you choose a voice? Uh, what I recommend is that you actually get help with that. Here's, from my experience, what we've found is that we've had several authors who have come to us where they've already picked a voice. And so far, it's never worked out well.
Interesting.
Either we've had to recast, or that's most often the case. Uh, there was one author who found a voice. She had actually had auditioned a few. She picked one, had her record the whole thing, and then she came to us and she said, "The narrator is asking for, like, direction, and I don't know what to tell her." I was like, "Okay, this is, one of the challenges to note, um, that you could get yourself stuck in that position." But then also, as we were hers was, like, for kids, and we were adding in music and sound effects for this project, and as we started to add those in, it became clearer and clearer that the person who narrated it wasn't the best option. When I asked her if I could hear the other auditions that she had gotten, it was immediately obvious to me who should have been the choice,
Interesting.
you know? So having and it's not, again, it's like with narration, it's a skill. that you develop. Like, what do you listen for? How are you listening for it? You want to hear how they're phrasing. Um, and typically, most who are not experienced with the casting process and what to listen for are listening to the sound of the voice. And you know, I hear I have a lot of people who will say, "Oh, so and so told me I have this beautiful voice. I should go into narrating audiobooks." And I think most people have beautiful voices. They're all very different, you know? But I don't think that, whatever your vocal tone is a reason. It's, are you a good storyteller? Can you bring that story to life?
Right, and each book is different too. Even nonfiction books, different styles, different genres, fiction,
Absolutely.
nonfiction. There's a voice for every. I'm sure for everyone. Kids' books,
Yep, that's right. Yeah. And
relationship.
some who are great at nonfiction, not so good at fiction, and vice versa. It's we each find our own niche and, you know, develop
And
that.
that's what Pro Audio Voices does too, is try to work with the author to get the right fit.
Exactly.
Correct.
Yeah, we have a whole casting process and a casting director who will meet first with the author and get a real feel for what it is that they want for their voice, and draws that out with many different, kinds of questions to help bring that out. And then that way, when she sends out the casting call, she can let the author or let the actors know what we're looking for, listening for. That helps because, when you're an actor and you've got an audition, the more you know about what they want, the more you can bring that quality of yourself forward, right? And then she'll, like, vet them, so she'll listen to all the auditions and go, "Okay, that one fits what she's listening for, and that one doesn't," and, and narrow it down. Yeah.
Right. These are long books, like the standard audiobook, what, 4 or 5 hours? What do you think the average length is?
Yeah, I would say even more these days, we're often seeing books that are like, 7 to 10, 15. We did one recently that was about 36.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this is a long time to be with another voice too. It's not just like a podcast for like or me, 45
Yeah.
minutes. It's half a day.
Yeah.
So it's a
Yeah,
very
and if
important.
it is, you're yeah, it's intimate and it's a lot of time to spend with somebody. And so if somebody has a real, like, edge to their voice or something, after a while that may not work out well, you know? Um, so,
And
yeah,
Becky, you just published a book, so you've done the process yourself as an author as well, correct?
I did, and it was actually really interesting, um, because my book, The Left Turn: Two Lives, Worlds Apart, it's a parallel universe story, and, um, it's written in from two point of views. So we have Hannah and James. And I knew early on that I wanted, so the chapters are alternating between them. And I knew that I wanted two narrators. I also knew that I would do Hannah, of course. But what was fascinating to me was, I did the whole full process. We did the casting call. I got several great voices, some of our top talent in pro audio voices, and I was surprised at how hard it was for me to select between them. They were all great, all the ones that I had in they were top 5. But each one did one aspect of it just slightly closer to what I was after. And any of them would have done a great job. So I picked one. I worked with J.S. Arquin. And, um, and then in the reviewing process, it was really fun to just close my eyes and listen to the story being told. Because and I encourage this for other authors as well. When you're listening, instead of having the text in front of you and trying to make sure did they get every word right. Just experience it as a listener would, as your audience will. It was great. It was such a delight.
Right, and this book just got published too, right? Your
It
new book.
did. Yes, very recently out there.
What genre again would you place this book into?
I would
Fictional.
Yeah, this is fiction. It's metaphysical fiction or, magical realism are the ones that come closest to it. Yeah.
So then you can see your production of this, how Pro Audio Voices does a book. It's important. It's really interesting to talk with you because it's giving me insight into this whole new genre, whole new area of the book industry, but also the thought that's going into it. Like you
Yeah.
really do have to put a lot of thought, a lot of places to get it right
Yeah.
because sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that, I think that there's, um I think a lot of people are kinda just skimming over the process and missing out on so much, that that is available. I think of that especially in the pre-production process, just getting ready, making sure that it's really, that it's going to create the kind of listener experience that we're after.
And so you've published other books too. So this isn't just your first book, is that right?
It's not my first book, it's my first novel.
Oh, gotcha.
I have done a couple kids books and a couple few nonfiction books, about audiobook production.
And when on your website where it says 149 audiobooks narrated, is that you specifically or is that your company?
That's me personally.
Oh, wow.
And then, that may have gone up since I put that up there even. Our company has produced hundreds. I don't know what the number is at this point. Keeps growing.
The reason I'm saying that is that you aren't just a hands-off CEO. You've done the work, labored in the
Yeah.
vineyard, so to speak,
Yeah,
doing these
I
audiobooks, so you know the experience. Yeah.
I do, and, as I said, I came from it. I came to it from the theater side of things, from the performance side, and, um I think actually also my production experience, because 'cause I've worked in all aspects of theater as well, everything from producing, directing, dramaturgy, performance, props, all kinds of things. I love theater overall, and I think that has really helped as well in terms of my big picture thinking about audiobooks. But I started off as a narrator, and then when I started my company, it was still as a solopreneur, pretty much wearing all the hats. And it was about sort of end of 2017, beginning of wait a minute, no, that's not right. Yeah, no, that's about right. About the end of 2017, beginning of 2018, that I just made some shifts that started to make a dramatic difference and really step into it in a big way. And our company has just grown tremendously, over that time. And now we have 4 employees and, many core team members who are contractors, from all over the world, in addition to about 500 narrators and audio
Oh, wow.
engineers, again, all over the world, clients all over the
Congratulations.
world. Yeah,
That's awesome.
it's,
Congratulations. I mean,
thank you.
that's really, you're kind of following that arc of this audiobook growth. It's really something else. So it's
Yeah,
congratulations. Very important too.
yeah,
I think
thank
that's
you.
kind of what you put across in this last 45 minutes. Um, in this book, this new book that you just put out, The Left Turn, Two Lives Worlds Apart, is that going to be one of your first books on Amplify?
It is. Yes, it is.
So people can check
Um,
out. Then you can support your local author, Becky
that's
Parker
right.
Geist, if you go there and listen to this first.
That's right.
Um, we've covered a lot of territory. I've learned a lot, thought a lot of thoughts differently. I think that you can think that listeners who may not even be in the book industry can see that there's a whole new side to these stories, this audio, and a lot of thought
Yeah.
going in there. It's very important. Is there anything you'd like to add or anything I missed? I mean, I can put in the show notes a link to your website, to your book, and hopefully to Amplify whenever that's ready. But
Yeah,
is there anything?
Yeah, just going to our website, proaudiovoices.com will be the best place to find Amplify right now, and probably ongoing. Um, yeah, I think, if there's anything else, I guess I would just say, just encouragement to, look into Amplify because it is, y from my perspective, it is for the listeners, it is for the authors, and it is also to make a dramatic change in the industry that I think is timely. It's so needed because the very people who are creating the content that we love, that is changing our lives. I mean, every day, when you read a book or you listen to a book, it changes you in some way, right? So we're like as authors, the story spinners, and we're making a big difference. The way that we as listeners of audiobooks can help make that big difference is through supporting the authors, and Amplify is the best way to do that.
Yeah, it's like going to your local bookstore and supporting them through that,
It
through
is
keeping
it
that culture alive too. I mean,
exactly.
especially when you see that variance between what Audible and Amazon's giving you without a lot any it's like a mystery box or something like, why am I ended up with this? I just
Yeah,
send me the money, don't figure it out. With some
yeah,
transparency, it sounds like through Amplify, I think authors would be I'm interested in it. So
yeah, yeah,
uh, hopefully other authors will listen and pick that up and go to Pro or Audio Voices and check that out.com. And do
yeah.
you have social media, or is it social media under your company or yourself?
We do. We're out there both as the company and me as author on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok. I think
Okay.
that's all.
Congratulations on your success. I
YouTube.
think that's awesome that you have that many
Thank
employees. I didn't know you had all the employees and that much talent, that roster of a talent. So hopefully people who want to do an audiobook can find a good fit, good talent fit through you.
Yeah, and we were
It's
always
very important.
open. We start off with a free call, just a discovery call because we want to make sure that we're in alignment with the author. If we're not a good fit, then let's not do it. But if we are, then we just love working with authors.
Awesome. And that's on the websites. Both websites have phone numbers. So
Yes.
people, if you hear this, you can just pick it up and you will see the links to these two websites, Becky's website and Pro Audio Voices in the show notes. So people can just click on that. But thank you so much for your time. Really fascinating conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate being here.
Take care. Stay there.
Okay.
Stay there.